let's play with the chemistry a little, not wanting to make it a storytelling marathon, but to see what happens in our endeavors to answer the question, how do we maintain and sustain ourselves in a state of Satchitananda or Satori, or that state where all the three levels of mind merge together to allow reactions that are not in response to the outward, but arise spontaneously from the inward when the chemistry enters. Patrick was an Irishman who was somewhat uneducated. He worked as a shepherd in the wilds of Ireland. But one Christmas time, he won a dart competition which allowed him to go and visit a very famous safari park in Africa. So of course when Patrick came back to his homeland, all his friends in the pub were interested to hear what had happened to him. What did you see, Patrick? What did you see? And Patrick said, oh, I saw this animal with a long neck and long legs and funny little ears. What were they called, Patrick? Oh, they were Dungeroos, said Patrick. And what else did you see, Patrick? Oh, I saw this animal got all stripes on its back and it could run like the wind. What was it called, Patrick? Oh, it was Dungeroos. And what else did you see, Patrick? Oh, I saw this animal that made a great roar and it had all this fur on its back. What was it called, Patrick? Dungeroos. And so it went on and on. And finally, all his friends in the pub were scratching their heads and saying, but Patrick, how could all the animals be named Dungeroos? Oh, said Patrick, we went through a big gate at the opening of the park and it had a big sign and it said, all the animals in this park are Dungeroos. Then there's that old story about the king, and his kingdom was peaceful. His grain coffers were full, his orchards were in abundance, his people were happy, and he was fully occupied with the affairs of state. But there were moments just before he slipped between the satin sheets of his bed, where he would sometimes sit gazing out of his window at his kingdom and sigh, a deep sigh. It seemed that he had everything, and yet there was discontent in his heart. Now after some time, the gods in the heavenly realms witnessed this and decided that it was time for him to learn another lesson. And so one of the gods descended from the heavenly realms, and as is possible with these great beings, suddenly, instead of being just the one entity, he appeared as two, a great eagle and a small dove. And the dove went flying down towards the earth with the eagle in pursuit. But as they neared terra firma, the dove flew into the window and landed on the king's arm, and beseeched him, "Please save me, save me! I'm being pursued by an eagle. He wants to eat me. Protect me." And of course, this was the king's mandate, to take care of all things, creatures included. But then the eagle flew in the window and landed on his other arm, and standing up regally, it said, "Give me my prey. This is my right. I have a right to food. And this is my food." Now, the king was in a very, very great dilemma. What should he do? It was his mandate to take care of all creatures, and of course, this mandate included ensuring that they had food to eat. He was in a state of dilemma. But then he had a thought, and he called one of his courtiers over to him, and he said, "Bring me the sharp knife with the ivory handle and the golden scales from my coffers." And when they were brought, the king sent off all the women of the court so as to not offend their sensibilities. And he lifted up his robe and he said to the eagle, "If I give you meat that weighs the same as this dove, will you be satisfied?" "Yes," said the eagle. So the king sliced a chunk from his thigh and placed it on the scales on which the dove had also been placed. But nothing happened. So the king sliced another slice, and each time a piece of meat was taken from his bones, nothing happened. The scales did not move, until finally the king's thighs, calves, arms were cleared of flesh, and still nothing had changed. The king was in a great state. "What else can I give? I've given you all my flesh." Just then, both the eagle and the dove resumed their state as the illuminated, godly being, and said to the king, "You have passed the test." And with that, the king was restored to his original state. His flesh returned to his bones. The heavenly creature disappeared from sight. But thereafter, there was no moment when the king sat at his window, nor from then on did he have a moment of discontent in his heart. And finally, the story of the king who was about to leave his body. So he called his son, the prince who was to take over his realm. and said to his son, "I am dying, but in our family there has been an heirloom. Take it, read it." And he handed his son a book wrapped in a silken cover. He passed on, and the prince came to be a king. But his life was so busy. There was the coronation, and then the choosing of a wife, and the taking care of his boundaries so that no one could overtake his kingdom. And so it went on for many years. It was not until his eldest son was 17 years old that finally he realized that he had not taken up this heirloom. And in doing so, he recognized that even though his life was filled with everything conceivable that would bring contentment and well-being, his coffers again were full, his people content, but he had no peace. So, taking the silken cover from the book, he went into his chamber to read. But of course the affairs of state would always interrupt. There were knocks on his door, his courtiers wanting this or that, his queen wanting to have agreement about what pearls she should wear, etc., etc. But finally he said to each of them, "I am going to read. Leave me in peace." So he did. He opened the book, and its opening words were, "Sometimes those who have everything have nothing." And he read, and he read, and after he closed the book and wrapped it again in its silken cover, he called his queen to him and said, "My queen, I am leaving. I have found that even though I have everything and have served well, I am not a wise man. I go to seek wisdom. If I do not return, put our eldest son on the throne." And so the king divested himself of his robes, and he put on the simple robe of a traveling mendicant dervish, and he left the palace. He was not seen for many years, and so the queen put their son in the place as monarch. He served well, but one day an old wandering dervish came into town and went to a local coffee shop, and he asked the coffee shop owner, "What is your king like?" The coffee shop owner answered, "Oh, he is a fair and just ruler. Our kingdom thrives." And so the old dervish said, "I ask something of you," and taking out from under his robes the piece of silk wrapped around a book, and he handed it to the shopkeeper with a few coins and said, "Please, take this to your monarch and tell him it is a heritage and heirloom." The shopkeeper did as he was asked and was given audience to the king, and he placed the book with its silken cover at the feet of the king's throne. The young king took up the book and, taking off its silken cover, read the first lines: "Those who have everything sometimes have nothing." In this state that we arrive at in meditation, through chanting, through affirmations, through mantras, what is it that arises for us unbidden, without need of analyzing? Objectifying, contemplation, but spontaneously. Out of this little pot of stories, different as they are, if we were to bring all of these stories down to their levels of stories, nitty-gritty level, intuitive level, the undifferentiated level, we can see what they mean. What is this silly story about all animals being dangerous? Dungeroos. Oneness? Sameness? And having all of our flesh taken off our body. Surrender, giving all, and the book, the continuity of life, like our genes, like our relativeness to the very beginning of the amoebas in the ocean. Continuity, a thread. And when we put these three together, what do we get? In us as a chemistry. An awareness first of all, of the interrelatedness of everything, the oneness with everything. That every moment having surrender to whatever it is that's occurring as an experience. And this thread. What is it about you now that you can say is this presence that's there all the time, that we have to recognize as a thread? Maybe before it was a thread of, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'll never amount to anything. I mean, we've all had a thread. But what does this symbolism in this story mean? What is this that we have that's present in every single moment as a continuum in our life now? What is the representation in our life of this book? What is it that's been there all along for us?
There's really nothing.